Hello and welcome. Here are breaking stories from outside Africa. Now, Chile's ultra-conservative former lawmaker, Jose Antonio Cast, scored a decisive victory in Sunday's presidential election, defeating the center-left coalition candidate and positioning the country for its most right-wing government in 35 years. Cast captured 58.2% of the vote, while his challenger, communist candidate Jeanette Jara, garnered 41.8%. Supporters celebrated in the streets, chanting his name and honking horns. Now, in his victory speech, Cast emphasized restoring order, pledging to crack down on crime, deport undocumented immigrants, and revive Chile's economy. He called his win a broad mandate and tremendous responsibility, urging respect for political opponents even as celebrations swirled around him.
Tenemos que tener mucha firmeza contra la delincuencia, el crimen organizado y la impunidad y el descontrol. Pero también tenemos que tener mucha grandeza para reconstruir la convivencia, el respeto y la confianza de nuestros compatriotas.
Lo malo estaba en la calle, ahora nos tocó nuestro tiempo. Ya era hora. Necesitamos paz, trabajo, seguridad sobre todo. ¿No es cierto? Bueno, y eso estamos celebrando. Es un gran día para Chile, para nuestra república. Como siempre fue, como siempre debió haber sido. Pero bueno, lo malo ya pasó. Hoy empieza una nueva etapa para nuestro país y estamos felices.
No sé qué esperar para el resto de los chilenos, que en realidad yo creo honestamente que él va a ser presidente de unos pocos y es una pena por la gente que votó por él y va a salir afectada.
Tensions reignite between Cambodia and Thailand as renewed clashes have killed at least 31 people and displaced roughly 800,000, officials report. Now, Cambodia accused Thai forces of bombing near a displaced persons camp in Siem Reap province, less than 2 hours from the UNESCO World Heritage Site Angkor Wat, marking the deepest strike into Cambodian territory in the current conflict. Now, the fighting stems from a long-standing colonial-era border dispute, with each side blaming the other for provocations.
អ្វីដែលគួរឲ្យកត់សម្គាល់ផងដែរថាចំនួននៃការប្រើប្រាស់យន្តហោះចម្បាំង F-16 ទម្លាក់គ្រាប់បែកនិងការប្រើប្រាស់គ្រាប់បែកចង្កោមរបស់យោធាថៃវាយប្រហារមកលើកម្ពុជាកាន់តែមានចំនួនទំហំកើនឡើងជាលំដាប់និងពង្រីកការបាញ់ប្រហារមកលើកម្ពុជាកាន់តែចូលមកជ្រៅក្នុងដែនអធិបតេយ្យដោយនៅថ្ងៃនេះគឺមានការទម្លាក់គ្រាប់បែកពីយន្តហោះ F-16 ចូលមកដល់ក្បែរជំរំជនភៀសសឹកនៅក្នុងភូមិសាស្ត្រស្រុកស្រីស្នំខេត្តសៀមរាបបន្ថែមទៀតវាគឺជាសង្គ្រាមឈ្លានពានទឹកដីពេញទីដែលមិនអាចប្រកែកបានលើសពីនេះកងទ័ពឈ្លានពានថែមទាំងបានបាញ់ដាក់ទីតាំងស៊ីវិលដោយមិនរើសមុខមិនរើសទីកន្លែងដែលធ្វើឲ្យជនស៊ីវិលស្លូតត្រង់របស់យើងរងគ្រោះជាច្រើនហើយហេដ្ឋារចនាសម្ព័ន្ធស៊ីវិលជាច្រើនក៏រងការបំផ្លិចបំផ្លាញរហូតមកទល់នឹងពេលនេះមានជនស៊ីវិលស្លូតត្រង់ខ្មែរយើងបានស្លាប់ចំនួន15នាក់និងរងរបួស73នាក់ក្នុងនោះមានស្ត្រីមានកុមារនិងចាស់ជរាចំណែកជនភៀសសឹកចេញពីលំនៅឋានក៏បានកើនដល់ជាង40,000នាក់ហេដ្ឋារចនាសម្ព័ន្ធជាច្រើនរងការបំផ្លិចបំផ្លាញដូចជាផ្ទះសម្បែងផ្លូវស្ពានសាលារៀនមន្ទីរពេទ្យវត្តអារាមរហូតដល់ប្រាសាទបុរាណដែលជាសម្បត្តិបេតិកភណ្ឌដ៏មានតម្លៃរបស់មនុស្សជាតិថែមទៀតផងអ្នកនាំពាក្យរាជរដ្ឋាភិបាលកម្ពុជាសូមប្រកាសថ្កោលទោសយ៉ាងខ្លាំងក្លាបំផុតចំពោះអំពើសាហាវព្រៃផ្សៃរបស់យោធាថៃមកលើជនស៊ីវិលស្លូតត្រង់កម្ពុជានិងសូមអំពាវនាវឲ្យសហគមន៍អន្តរជាតិដាក់សម្ពាធទៅលើប្រទេសថៃឲ្យបញ្ឈប់សកម្មភាពអមនុស្សធម៌របស់ខ្លួនជាបន្ទាន់និងបង្ខំឲ្យប្រទេសនេះងាកមករកដំណោះស្រាយដោយសន្តិវិធីជាចាំបាច់
Away from that, EU top diplomat Kaja Kallas warned Monday that using Russia's frozen assets to finance Ukraine is looking increasingly difficult ahead of a crucial European Council summit on Thursday. Callas, warning on the narrowing path to securing a deal on Russia's immobilized billions, came as European leaders gather in Berlin to try to influence the shape of a potential peace deal in discussions with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and envoys from U.S. President Trump. Now, EU leaders, including German Chancellor Friedrich Merz, insist that using Russia's frozen assets is the only credible method for Europe to keep Ukraine financially afloat from next year. But in the run-up to the summit in Brussels, fears are growing that the push could be derailed by opposition from EU states who are under pressure from both Russia and the United States.
Really a very important week for financing questions. We have different options on the table, and they will be discussed in the leaders meeting on Thursday. What President Costa has said, we will not leave the meeting before we get result, before we get the decision on the funding for Ukraine. The most credible option is the reparations loan, and this is what we are working on. We are not there yet, and it is increasingly difficult, but we're doing the work. We still have some days.
China sanctioned the Japanese military's former top officer on Monday, December 15, for colluding with Taiwan independent separatist forces. Now, Beijing's foreign ministry said as a week-long row with Tokyo simmers, Shigeru Iwasaki, who was chief of staff of the Japanese Self-Defense Forces Joint Staff from 2012 to 2014, was named as an advisor to Taiwan's government in March, according to Taiwanese media. Now, the sanctions come as China and Japan are enmeshed in a row over Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's suggestion in November that Tokyo could intervene militarily in any attack on the self-ruled democratic island. China claims Taiwan as part of its territory and has threatened to use force to bring it under its control.
对前统合幕僚长严其茂出任台湾当局所谓政务顾问，多次就此向日方提出严正交涉。针对严其上述恶劣行径，依据《中华人民共和国反外国制裁法》。 中方发布外交部令，公布对其反制措施，惩戒其同台独分裂势力勾连挑衅。王毅外长已就此向黄英贤外长致慰问电，中方对遇难者表示哀悼，向遇难者家属和伤者表示慰问。
Governments, institutions, and rights groups across the world have condemned the conviction of the former pro-democracy media tycoon and British citizen Jimmy Lai in Hong Kong on national security charges. The 78-year-old was found guilty in West Kowloon District Court on Monday of 1 count of conspiracy to publish seditious publications and 2 counts of conspiracy to foreign collusion. The charges were brought under the city's punitive national security law introduced in 2020 and a British colonial-era sedition law that has been used in recent years by authorities. Lai now faces spending the rest of his life in prison amid increasing fears about his physical condition. A diabetes sufferer, he is thought to have lost about 10 kilograms in the past year. Yvette Cooper, the British Foreign Secretary, said the UK condemns the politically motivated prosecution of Jimmy Lai that has resulted in today's guilty verdict.
The reason why I'm here is to free my father, and in order to do that, the UK government has to do more. We've been very grateful of this report. You would have seen the statement from our Foreign Minister, Yvette Cooper. But now it's time to put action behind words and make my father's release a precondition to closer relationships with China.
Now, moving away from that, South Korea's ousted conservative president Yoon Suk-yeol plotted for over a year to impose martial law to eliminate his political rivals and monopolize power, investigators concluded Monday. Yoon's martial law decree in December 2024 lasted only several hours and resulted in his rapid downfall. Independent counsel Cho Young-suk, who announced the 6-month probe's result, also accused the former president and his military allies of ordering operations against North Korea in a deliberate bid to stoke tensions and justify his plans to declare martial law. Despite the lack of serious response from North Korea, Cho said that Yoon declared martial law by branding the liberal-controlled legislature as anti-state forces that must be urgently removed. Meanwhile, police raided the headquarters of the Unification Church on Monday as they probe separate bribery allegations against more politicians. In an independent investigation involving Yoon's wife and the church has been underway for several months. We now turn our focus to Australia, where a shocking act of violence has left at least 16 people dead, including the gunman, after a father and son duo opened fire on a Jewish community. Now, authorities are treating the attack as terrorism, raising urgent questions about radicalisation, antisemitism, and the growing threat of ideologically driven violence in societies often viewed as stable or secure. Now, this tragedy is not occurring in isolation. From Europe to North America and now the Asian Pacific, minority communities are increasingly becoming targets in an era marked by online extremism, geopolitical tensions, and the global spread of hate-based ideologies. So we ask, how did a country known for strict gun laws and social cohesion arrive at this moment? And what does this attack reveal about the evolving nature of global terrorism? Joining us to discuss this is Yemi Fajemisin, his Geopolitics analyst in Glasgow, UK. Thank you so much for joining us, Yemi.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, Yemi, what does this attack tell us, about the changing face of terrorism in countries that, were once considered low risk for mass extremist violence, and your overall thoughts?
Right. I think let's get back to some of the background that led to where we are today. So we know that more than 1,000 people gathered around the Bondi Beach in Sydney, Australia, at the first night of the Hanukkah, and they gathered there to watch the lightning of menorah. So the attack is clearly being described as a terrorist attack against it's an antisemitism one, which means hatred towards Jews. And we know that there are two gunmen involved there, father and son. The first gunman was killed by the police, a 50-year-old man, and the son was subdued as well. And the son, 24-year-old, is still recovering or critical condition in the hospital. So that's the background around that. Now back to the question regarding atrocities like this around low-risk countries. We know from the start of the war in Gaza, there's been a rise in anti-Semitism attacks around Western world generally. Even in Australia, there's been cases of arson around synagogues. So what this means is even for countries that people often perceive as low crime countries, they're still vulnerable to these things. And there's so many factors that contribute to all these happenings. Also, what is important here as well is it's impossible to actually police things 100%, especially in case of when people self-radicalize or when people radicalize themselves online. So any society, no matter how safe you want to claim you are, you're still kind of vulnerable to these things. And this is a classic example of what we've seen.
Okay, Yemi. So, but, speak to us on the significance, how significant is the fact that, this was allegedly carried out by a father and son duo? How significant is that?
Somewhat significant. We know that the father arrived on a student visa to Australia around 1998, and the child is It was born in Australia. So the dynamics involved there between father and son, we don't know the details yet. I'm sure the authorities or security authorities will be releasing some of the dynamics to the public in the coming days and coming hours. What we do know so far is the Australian Prime Minister has said that they don't seem to be affiliated to any known terror organization. So in terms of the dynamics here, the picture is not clear yet. It may be a case of they were self-radicalized online. It may be a case of they were moved to commit this appalling atrocity because of the war in Gaza. So that picture is not clear yet. But what we do know that these things do happen. We have a similar case in the UK, for example, during the Syrian war, when a 15-year-old girl traveled, a schoolgirl, 15-year-old schoolgirl traveled from London to Syria. And the media picked it up and dubbed as a jihadi wife. So these things happen where you see complicated dynamics. So this one is a father and son. It could be anyone. It could be somebody as young as 12-year-old, 15-year-old. Yeah. But I'm sure the authorities will be releasing more details in coming days.
Okay. Now, it does talk about, radicalization within family and also community spaces as well. But despite Australia's tough gun control laws, this attack still occurred. So does this point to, gaps in intelligence, radicalization monitoring, or community-level prevention?
Yes, we know that Australia is quite safe when it comes to gun control. In fact, they banned automatic weapons and also semi-automatic firearms around 1996. I think they had a bit of a terrorist attack, a shocking one around 1996 that led to the ban of all these rifles. But back to your question, I think it's almost impossible for any society to have 100% prevent measure against things like this. So we've seen cases, especially in cases of lone wolves, people that just decide to do these things without any affiliation to any known terror cells. So we had similar example in America a few weeks ago when a refugee from Afghanistan decided to shot two U.S. National Guards. And this is somebody that's been vetted by the U.S. system. And U.S. vetting system, I would argue, is one of the toughest in the world when it comes to asylum. So it happened in America as well. So what that tells us is it's impossible for any security architecture to have 100% foolproof of any prevent measures when it comes to terrorist attacks. What they could do is to minimize it. But in terms of monitoring everybody 100%, I think that's almost impossible for any society to achieve.
Okay. Now, it does seem, that Jewish communities worldwide are facing rising threats. So how much is, global geopolitics, particularly conflicts in the Middle East, influencing, local acts of violence against the Jews?
Yes, we know for that. I think most countries around the Western world, for example, they've been expecting some form of attack of all this nature since the start of the war in Gaza. So obviously that's contributed to a lot of anti-Semitic rhetorics and attacks across Europe. We had a similar case in London as well, a knife attack in one of the synagogues. So this contributed to making the Jews unsafe because of what's been going on in Gaza. And the frustrating things about these attacks is not all Jews actually agree with the Zionist regime in Israel. So not everybody that's called Jew agrees with what's going on with the government of Israel. Unfortunately, most of them get caught up with terrorism activities around the world. So I think it's important to stress that not all Jews agree with what's going on in Israel. But unfortunately, these attacks still happen from time to time, partly driven from what's going on from the rest of the world, especially in the Middle East. The Middle East has always been a complicated region when it comes to the Israel and Palestine issues. And a lot of people feel strongly about these things. Even in London, we've had series of pro-Palestine march, and some people tend to conflate that meaning anti-Semitism matches, which they're not. So there's different rhetorics around these things, and some of these things fuel different ideologies, which make things really complicated.
All right. Speaking of complications, what role, though, do online platforms and extremist networks play, in amplifying these anti-Semitic and hate-based ideologies across the border? Because we're trying to look beyond, Australia to find out the lessons that other democracies should draw about protecting minority communities, while preserving civil liberties.
Some role when it comes to spreading hate or ideologies across the globe. We live in a world now where any idea, good or bad, can reach millions, many millions in a matter of weeks, days, and hours. So I think we need more of a regulation around the tech giants. I would say probably need to work with all the national democracies to come up with a framework where the spreading of hate, different ideologies can be reduced. I mean, the template is already there. In the UK, for example, we have what we call an online safety bill, which protects young people from accessing pornographic websites, and is working quite well.
Yeah.
So there's nothing stopping the tech giants, for example, from expanding that framework to deal with spreading of poisonous ideology, which people can access in a matter of hours and can spread to many, many millions in a matter of hours. So these are things that can be worked out with the tech giants, with the national government.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Yemi Fajemisin, Geopolitics analyst, for joining us and also speaking on this. Thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, the tragedy in Australia echoes challenges closer to home because across Africa, extremist violence has, similarly targeted minority and vulnerable communities, from deadly attacks on churches and mosques in northern Nigeria to assaults on villages in Burkina Faso and Mali. So these incidents show how radicalization, hate-based ideologies, and fragile governance continue to threaten social cohesion, just as in other parts of the world. Well, that's all on Beyond the Continent. After the break, the conversation continues.